So, thank you for talking with me, first of all. I really appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. Absolutely.
Well, first of all, I'm a bit starstruck, admittedly. I really enjoyed your book.
Oh wow,
Like,
almost
one of my favorites.
chatties.
Yeah.
That's great. I love seeing that.
I guess I'll jump right into the
Yeah.
questions I have.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I know you started out translating other people's books. So how did the shift to writing your own book, We Jane, come about?
I actually like the writing actually had come first. I've been writing since I guess like seriously since my early 20s. And then about 10 years ago, I moved to Montreal and at the time was working on like a completely different book actually that I just put in the drawer, a novel that didn't quite make it to the light of day. And after I had been living here for about a year, I got curious about translating. So that was kind of when I got into translation. And then from there got into literary translation, which I do still really love. But yeah, this whole time I've also been like quietly carving out time to write as well. But it's been nice because the two practices really like feed each other in a really interesting way. So I'm really happy to have both. It's kind of like gives me a nice balance when I need to switch gears a little bit. And yeah, I feel like translating made me a better writer. My writing practice has like helped with my translation work. So yeah, they've been kind of parallel for quite some time now. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you done a French translation of We Jane?
No, but actually there's one in the works by my friend Geneviève Robichaud, who lives in Sackville in New Brunswick. And is originally from Moncton. So she's actually, we just did a little event together last night where she shared a bit of her translation and we talked about the process. So I'm really excited to see that. I wouldn't have dared to translate it myself into French, but she's a brilliant translator, and I'm really, it's a really cool experience to be on the other side of it, you know, and usually it's me
Yeah.
translating someone's book. So it's been really fun, especially because she's a friend and it's been really fun to talk with her about it as she sort of dives in. Yeah.
I was reading up on a couple of the other interviews you've done for the book to like be prepared and not ask you the same thing twice. And I was really interested about what you said about wanting to write a contemporary book about abortion because all the ones you encountered were either like a dystopian future thing or set in the past where access wasn't as readily available. And I was also interested about what you said about it not being the main driving narrative force of the book, which
Mhm.
I found really interesting. So I wondered if you had anything more to say on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like as you say, I had been finding that either we're like in the books and films really that we were in the past where like there's this built-in conflict because it's not legal, it's hard to access, so that's your narrative tension, that's the conflict of the book. And then otherwise, yeah, like you're often seeing like this kind of dystopian near future where like all reproductive rights are in jeopardy, and like both of those are interesting perspectives. I wanted to see something now, and I also did feel like even in terms of difficulty accessing, like you could still write that book now. You know, there are still people who live outside of urban centers or who for various reasons don't have easy access. But yeah, like then the other side of it was that I wanted to avoid that being the narrative arc because it just it puts like a weight on the event that I didn't want to give it. And one of the things, actually, like a film rather than a book, but there's this film by the French director Agnès Varda called One Sings, the Other Doesn't. And it's about these two women, and it kind of traces them and their friendship through like a large part of their lives. And at different points, both of them have an abortion. And, you know, it's in like the 70s in France. So again, like it's not super easy for them to access. But in neither of those cases is that a turning point in the film or even really in their lives. It's like an event in their life, and it's not insignificant, but the film allows them such a bigger life and such a like a broader look at where this would fit in. And I found that really rang true to me, like it's not that it's an unimportant or insignificant event, but life is full of many, many events. And so in terms of like a character in the book having an abortion, that is kind of how I wanted to situate it. Like in the case of Martha, like it's already happened by the time the book begins, because I just wanted it to be like what the driving forward of her, like what happens next. Yeah, I just felt that we didn't get that view quite enough.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite part of the book, Martha's perspective and like the struggles and how she felt in her place within the world. Like I keep using the word achingly real to describe it, because when I was reading it, I was like, oh, sometimes I feel that way too. And like reading it, I just wanted to read more and more. And it was like I was sinking into this world that was kind of like this headspace that was kind of like glum, but it was a good kind of glum to sit in for a while.
I know
So
that kind of glum, yeah.
Yeah, it was beautifully written. So I was wondering, what was your like main intention behind Martha's character? What were you hoping to say or accomplish or leave with your readers with her?
That's an interesting question. I mean, like I was kind of interested in that moment in her life in terms of like the age that she's at. That kind of moment where you're in your like early 30s and you don't have a lot of ties still, she's like a bit rootless, but she's starting to want to have, like the word she uses is like later she wants to be obliged. She wants to be tied to something or someone or have something to work for. And yeah, I was really thinking about that moment in her life where like, maybe she had like sort of been attempting this to start building a life in this couple with this person. And then once that's gone, she's sort of at loose ends and kind of more interested in like turning to the collective than the couple, like what is another way I could live. So yeah, like for her, and of course, I was interested in having this kind of multi-generational group. I wanted that intergenerational friendships, the kind of tensions between them. But, I felt kind of maybe most comfortable being closest to Martha's perspective because she's closest to my age, that felt I felt a little more at ease with that. So yeah, I mean, I guess it was like a combination of factors. And part of it's also like she was kind of just my way in, when you start thinking about, when I started thinking about the story, it was her and Ruth from the beginning. And I just naturally kind of got closer into the head of Martha, I guess for obvious reasons, she's like, I'm closest to her in age.
That was another interesting thing too, the relationship between Martha and Ruth. Those kind of like female relationships where you kind of want to like become the person you're friends with, but you also like love them in a way, right? And that weird juxtaposition between the two. I found that really interesting in how you handled that and presented it.
It's an interesting thing, right? I mean, it's like I was really I've been kind of perplexed. Like a couple of times I've read things where people have taken that friendship to be like a toxic relationship. I mean, I didn't think about it that way at all. It's complicated, but it's complicated on both of their ends. I mean, Martha also in that kind of relationship where she's looking up to Ruth, she is a little bit in love with her. She kind of wants to become her. She's just kind of in awe. Like she's put this person on a pedestal. And then, when Ruth is inevitably like a flawed human, she's just kind of flaky. Maybe she's a little bit full of shit sometimes. It's nothing even really that bad. But when she kind of falls from the pedestal, it's like it's Martha's responsibility to forgive her for being human too, right? Like Ruth didn't ask to get up there on the pedestal. And I'm really, that's such an interesting, I feel like a lot of us have had some version of that relationship with like a mentor figure or just like even a friend that's a little bit older. And yeah, there's just so much there, right? It's such a, like, it can be such a pivotal relationship in your life. And, we don't tend to like give those kinds of friendships as much airplay as like a romantic relationship or, you know,
Yeah,
something kind
definitely.
of, yeah. But it can have just as much of an impact on your life.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I really like that focus on their friendship. And when she kind of discovers like Ruth's real name and she becomes human and falls off that pedestal you're talking about, it
Mhm.
really kind of seems to shake Martha and she kind of goes back to places she said I won't go again, right? So
Yeah,
that's really
yeah.
interesting. Like Ruth is kind of like holding her whole like mental framework together.
Mhm.
And then she kind of when that humanity, those flaws came through, kind of like really shook. And I thought that was really interesting how she went back to like the party scene in her hometown.
Yeah, it kind of is in a funny way can set you free, right? Because if you're following this person, then you have this moment of like, oh, well, actually, I can go do my own thing. Like I don't have to be in thrall in this way. Yeah, it's an interesting shift that happens.
Another thing I found super interesting about the book was your decision to present dialogue without the quotation marks. And I've seen that a couple of times in a couple of different books. Like I guess Sally Rooney would be the most well-known example. But I was wondering, like I'm kind of fascinated by the choice. Like I'm a bit of a stickler for rules, so my instant thought is like, what's happening here? But then when I'm trying to like understand it and appreciate what the author's trying to do with it, I think it's a really interesting choice. So I was wondering what you were trying to say or accomplish with that.
Yeah, for sure. I started doing that like a long time ago, actually. And I think it like initially it's something about speed, you know, like I find it doesn't it allows the rhythm to continue in a different way when you don't have it broken up as much. And I also do quite a lot of like reported speech, like she said about the such and such, because again it allows me to kind of keep going. And I really like rhythm, and to, like I read out loud to myself often when I'm writing. I really like to be able to hear it, and kind of manipulating that rhythm and doing what I want with it is important to me. And yeah, I sort of like the frictionlessness of it. And I mean, like converse, and then on the other side, there is something I thought about early on, which was that like if I'm going to do this, if I'm not going to mark the dialogue conventionally, then it's going to kind of force me to make the dialogue good enough that you know what's happening. You know, like I don't really want it to be. I'm not intentionally setting out for it to be confusing, you know. Like my hope is that it's still is that like once you kind of realize what's happening and you get used to it, that it's clear enough. Because yeah, I kind of like that extra little bit of impetus to really like sharpen the dialogue so that we know what's happening. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of just like a stylistic preference for me at this point. And I mean, who knows, maybe like, you know, I'll be working on another project and feel like I want to demarcate it in a different way. But I felt like it kind of worked for this story. I liked the speed of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked it too. I thought it made the readers stay close to Martha's perspective, but
Mhm.
also kind of take a step back and take a broader view. Like it felt like there was like more of a distance between the reader and the dialogue, which I thought really worked for like keeping in Martha's headspace and realizing
Mm.
like maybe her unreliability as a narrator and also like the broader themes of the book and what was going on.
Yeah, it's interesting that I spent a lot of time thinking about the distance we had from her. Like when I first started drafting the book, actually, I was writing it in the first person. It was too close to Martha. Like I felt like I needed that bit of distance that the third person would give me. Um, and again, yeah, like the you know, this can come through with the dialogue too. It's like that exact amount of distance that I wanted was hard to land on. Yeah, it kind of made it work once I figured it out.
Yeah, I think you did it really well. Like I felt like I was sitting in the exact right space to connect with Martha and digest the story.
I'm glad to hear.
This book was also nominated or on the long list for the Gillett Prize, so congratulations for that.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
how and where were you when you found out? What was that like?
It was actually pretty funny. I work from home right now. Well, I have been since the beginning of the pandemic, but I have a day job at a translation company. I'm in my little office in my apartment right now. And so I was at work. It was like a weekday morning, and I didn't even know that they were announcing the Giller list. Like it was really off my radar. And my phone rang at around 10 a.m. and all I could see was that it was an Ontario number. And when I picked up the phone, like there was nobody there immediately. And so I thought like, oh, it's like Elections Canada or something. Like I don't have time for this. And I just hung up. And then they called right back again. So I was like, okay, this must be something. And it turned out to be Hazel, my publisher. And she was like, Amy, are you sitting down? And I was like, oh my God, something bad happened. And she was like, no, it's good news. And so then she told me they had been watching the press conference. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the last thing I ever expected. So it was a nice phone call. Yeah.
Did they have an event this year? Did you go there or anything?
They did. I didn't go. It's only the short list that goes to the a gala, but they did have one. I'm fairly certain. Yeah, in Toronto. I think I just remember seeing like everybody all dressed up, which is fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
and nicer than having to do it on Zoom.
So the publishing aspect will be of particular interest to students at VIU in the creative writing department. So I'm curious about how you came to sell at Bookhug, your publishing house for Lee Jane, and how that came about.
Yeah, for sure. I already had a relationship with Bookhug because I have published a few translations with them. So my relationship with them started really in 2016. I published the first novel that I translated, this book by Vicky Gendreau. And I had heard that I had read this novel and I had completely fallen in love with it. And I really wanted to translate it, but I had never translated a novel. I was like a pretty new translator. And I heard that Bookhug was interested. And so I decided I would put my name in the hat and like pitch myself to do it. And it ended up working out. And they're really lovely. I had a really nice experience working with them. And so I did a couple more books with them. And then when I was thinking about my own book, it was kind of like my secret hope that I would get to stay with them. I had been talking a little bit with the fiction editor and eventually told him like I do, like I have this manuscript. So I sent it to him, only to him at first. I didn't send out the book widely at all. I kind of have my heart set on like, hopefully this will work out with them. And so I sent him the book finally once I felt it was ready. And they said yes. So it kind of worked out really nicely. But yeah, it's kind of I guess it's kind of unusual because, I have this pre-existing other relationship with them because of the translation. So it was kind of nice to get to like stay in the family,
Yeah, totally. Do you like it there? Like it's a good publishing house you'd recommend to other hopeful writers?
Oh yeah, they're wonderful. Yeah. It's a small publishing house, but they really care about their books and they have great taste and they've been so supportive. And then my editor who actually worked on the book with me is called Malcolm Sutton, and he actually designed the cover too. He was fantastic to work with. I had been looking forward to it because I knew him a little bit, and I really respected his opinion, and I was really looking forward to working on it with him. But it was so much even nicer of an experience than I thought. Like I spent like 5 years writing the book, and you're just by yourself with it. I didn't show it to anybody at all. I'm pretty private until I'm like ready to show it. So after all this time alone with it, it felt like such an honor to have this like really brilliant person like spending time thinking about my sentences and making some suggestions. And, he made a couple of suggestions that I found really helpful, like even structurally. And yeah, it was just such a nice experience. I really, I felt so grateful. So yeah, I mean, it's been a really wonderful working with them, like in every aspect, really. Yeah, can't say enough good things.
You say you were working on Me Jane for 5 years. Was that like the first thing you started writing when you began to write? I think you mentioned at the beginning of this interview you started writing in your early 20s, right? So
Yeah,
was that the first idea?
No, when I started out, like I was writing a lot of short stories, kind of as one often does. I didn't study creative writing, but when I was an undergrad, I studied English literature, and there were a couple of creative writing workshops, and I did take a few workshops. And so yeah, I was writing stories for for a good few years. And then, yeah, as I was saying, when I moved to Montreal, I had started working on another novel that was, some similar themes to the Jane book, but it was entirely set in Newfoundland. And it was like, I guess you could like it would have been the part of Martha's story before she left Newfoundland, like her like kind of last year there. But I just kind of couldn't make it work, like I got a draft of it. It wasn't really working, and I kind of decided to like put it away. And then not long after that, I kind of had the idea for the Jane book and sort of switched gears. And then yeah, it did take a long time because it's hard to find the time. Like I can't work on it full time. I get up really early, so I was writing it in the mornings before I went to my job. A few times I took like my whole vacation from work, went away by myself and worked on it. It was kind of a long haul, but I'm kind of glad, like I felt like even though that first book I just kind of threw it away. You learn something from it too, right? Like you have to kind of teach yourself how to write a novel. And now what I'm realizing is that you might have to teach yourself how to write each different novel, because sometimes now I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm sort of starting to think through an idea of a new book and haven't quite like found the door into it yet, nor have I really had the time to kind of dig in. But starting from scratch all over again, it's like, oh wow, it's like there's the really blank page, like you kind of do have to learn to do it all over again. Or maybe some people have it down, but I think like when I was a bit younger, I was in a big rush. I was writing that first novel and I really wanted to like get it out there, like I wanted to make something. And in retrospect, I'm kind of glad that like I was kind of forced to slow down and take my time a little bit, because I feel like I sort of needed it to get where I wanted to go with this book, for example. I guess it just takes time.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you were working on anything or writing anything right now, but I guess you kind of answered that too.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's been kind of, it's been so nice. I really didn't expect that I would still be talking about this book now, kind of. Like I didn't think its life would be the life that it's been having. Which is a very pleasant surprise, and I'm not at all unhappy about it. But it does mean like I haven't been able to quite like close the door on it in my mind. And what I've learned is that it makes it hard for me I'm not really able to have like several compartments going at once, I guess. But yeah, like I do have like, the germ of an idea that I'm kind of looking forward to even just kind of noodling around a bit, make some notes, do some reading, see if it turns into anything. That's what's next, I guess, is the thinking part.
Well, I'll keep my eye out for your name on bookshelves for sure. As a final question, I guess, what would your advice be to aspiring writers at VIU or anywhere really?
I feel like everybody says this, but like read a lot, and like widely, and eccentrically. And it goes a long way to like sharing your work with people when you're starting out and when you're really first finding your voice. I think it's really important, even if it's just to learn what not to listen to, like learning to trust your own style and your own voice and your own taste. I think that's a really important step, even though it's really scary when you're starting out. Yeah, like stay curious. Like that's kind of the crux of it, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for making time for me today.
Yeah, of
Really
course, it was my pleasure. It
Yeah,
really
like
makes my day to see all the sticky tabs in the book, actually. That's wonderful. I always like, sometimes you buy like a secondhand book and people have written in the margins, like I really love a lived in book, that somebody really like got physical with. So this was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you again.
Take care.